Have you ever had one of those moments where everything just feels fragile? Like the world you built around you, your plans, your job, your savings, your dreams could all shift in a single moment. Maybe you've looked around and thought, if I could just have a little more, just a little more stability, a little more money, a little more success, then I'd feel secure. It's something we all wrestle with at some point, isn't it? But let me ask you this, in the quiet moments when no one else is around and the noise dies down, do you ever wonder what really lasts? What actually brings peace to your soul? Because if we're honest, it's not the size of our bank account that brings true comfort. It's not the stuff we collect or the plans we stack up. It's something deeper. It's the presence of God, His peace, His purpose, His eternal love. Today, I want to gently invite you into a moment of reflection, not guilt, not fear, but a real look at where our hearts find their treasure. In this video, we'll reflect on God's message of love, peace, and faith, and how we can embrace it in our daily lives. There's a story Jesus told that speaks right into this, a story about a man who thought he had it all figured out. But one thing was missing. Let's begin by reflecting on the power of God's love, the kind of love that isn't shaken by a stock market crash or a layoff notice. The kind of love that doesn't vanish when life gets hard. In Luke 12, Jesus tells a parable about a rich man whose land produced a huge harvest. This man had so much grain, he didn't even have room to store it all. So what does he do? He says to himself, I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I'll store all my grain and my goods. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. Now on the surface, that might sound pretty smart, right? He's saving, planning ahead, getting ready to enjoy the good life. But then comes the twist. God says to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? And Jesus ends the story with this sobering line. This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. Let that settle in for a moment. Not rich toward God. See, the issue wasn't that the man was rich. It wasn't that he had a successful harvest. It's that his heart had attached itself to the wrong kind of treasure. He was focused entirely on his own comfort, his own plans, his own little world. But he had forgotten eternity. He had forgotten his Creator. He had forgotten to live a life poured out, not just built up. And in doing that, he missed everything. Now, I don't know your financial situation. You might be doing really well. You might be struggling. Or maybe you're somewhere in the middle, just trying to make it through each day. But here's the thing, this message isn't about how much you have. It's about what your heart trusts in. God's love is not about guilt tripping us for having blessings. It's about reminding us where true security lies. Because the truth is, money can disappear, possessions break, markets tumble. But God's presence, God's promises, those never fail. When Jesus says, be rich toward God, He's inviting us into a whole new way of living. A life where peace isn't based on how much is in your account, but how close you are to Him. A life where joy doesn't come from your portfolio, but from your purpose. And let me tell you, being rich toward God doesn't mean you have to sell everything and live in poverty. It means living open-handed. It means remembering that everything we have is a gift, and we are stewards, not owners. It means using what we've been given to bless others, to honor God, to serve with compassion and love. There's a certain freedom that comes with that kind of perspective. Because when your treasure isn't tied to things that rust or rot or fade away, you don't have to live in fear of losing them. You're anchored in something eternal, Have you ever seen someone who has very little by the world's standards, but they seem so full of joy, so at peace? Maybe it's a grandparent or someone at your church, or even someone you saw on a mission trip. And then you meet someone else who seems to have it all: nice car, big house, perfect looking life, but there's an emptiness in their eyes. That's the difference. One is building barns. The other is building a legacy that lasts forever. God's love invites us to think bigger. Not bigger barns, bigger hearts, bigger faith, bigger trust. So what does that look like in our everyday lives? It starts with something simple: gratitude. Every day, take a moment to thank God, not just for what you have, but for who He is, His goodness, His mercy, His presence in your life. Gratitude turns our focus away from what we lack and reminds us of what we already have in Him. It grows through generosity, not just with money, but with time, with attention, with love. When we give, we break the grip of greed. We say, Lord, I trust you more than I trust in having more, and it's sustained through surrender. Saying, God, I don't want to chase after security that fades. I want to walk with you, trust you, and be rich in the things that last. Now that we've talked about God's love and the peace it brings when we let go of chasing material security, let's move into how faith can strengthen us in our everyday walk. Faith is such a beautiful thing. It's not always flashy, and it doesn't always make headlines, but it's what carries us when everything else feels uncertain. When the rich man in Jesus' story built bigger barns, it wasn't because he was evil or malicious. It was because he trusted in what he could see, store, and control. And that's something we can all relate to, can't we? We like to feel safe. We like to have a plan. We like to know that tomorrow is taken care of, but faith is about walking with God even when we don't see the whole road ahead. It's choosing to trust Him over our own understanding. And that can be hard, especially in a world that constantly tells us to build, gather, hustle, and save for that someday when everything will finally feel secure. Yet faith whispers something different. Faith says, you don't have to carry it all. Faith says, your Father knows what you need. Faith invites us to lay down the anxiety, the endless striving, and just rest in God's presence. Jesus put it so clearly just a few verses after the story of the rich man. He said, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. For life is more than food, and the body more than clothes. Consider the ravens, they do not sow or reap, yet God feeds them. And then He asks this piercing question: who of you by worrying can add a single hour to your life? Think about that. We worry so much about the future, but worry has never bought us peace. It's never given us more time. It's never protected us from the unexpected. But faith gives us peace in the middle of the storm. Faith gives us courage when we're walking through something hard. Faith reminds us that we are not alone. Maybe you've been through seasons where the money ran out, the job fell through, or the future just looked cloudy. And yet, somehow, God showed up. Maybe it was a friend who helped in a pinch, a word of encouragement at just the right time, a quiet sense of calm that came over you when everything should have felt chaotic. That's the gift of faith that anchors you when everything else feels like it's drifting. And when we live from that place anchored in trust, grounded in God's goodness, we begin to see the world differently. We're not ruled by fear of what we might lose. We're not chasing wealth just to feel like we've made it. Instead, we become open to the kind of life that Jesus modeled. A life of compassion, a life of generosity, a life that puts people over possessions. There's this beautiful moment in Matthew 6 where Jesus says, Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. It's not just about where our money goes. It's about what we value, what we love, what we cling to when everything else fades. And what's so comforting about that is this: storing up treasure in heaven isn't about doing something grand or out of reach. It's found in the everyday choices we make. It's in the kindness we show, the love we give, the trust we place in God, even when the numbers don't add up or the path ahead isn't clear. There was a man I once heard about. He wasn't rich by the world's standards. In fact, he lived pretty simply, worked a regular job, drove an old car, never had much in savings. But he was one of the most joyful, peaceful people anyone had ever met. Why? Because he had a habit of giving, not just his money, but his time, his prayers, his presence. He checked in on neighbors. He quietly paid someone's bill when they were struggling. He prayed with people who were hurting. And when he passed away, his funeral was packed, not because he left behind a big inheritance, but because he left behind a legacy of love. His treasure wasn't in barns, it was in heaven, and that's the kind of life we're called to live. It's easy to get caught up in the pressures of today, wanting to provide, wanting to succeed, wanting to protect the people we love. And those desires aren't wrong. But when they become the foundation of our identity and our security, they start to take the place only God should hold. Because when it's all said and done, none of us can take any of it with us. The rich man in the parable thought he had years to enjoy what he'd stored up, but his life ended that very night, not because he was being punished, but because life is fragile. None of us know how long we have, and that's not meant to scare us. It's meant to wake us up, to help us live fully, love deeply, and trust God completely. There's something powerful about living like today matters for eternity. Not in a pressure-filled, do more kind of way, but in a way that reminds us that every moment is a chance to love, to give, to trust. When we do that, our lives become more than just a checklist of goals or a ladder to climb. They become stories of God's faithfulness, beacons of His peace, proof that a life built on faith is a life that truly lasts. Next, we'll explore the enduring hope that God promises, the kind of hope that never runs dry, even when everything else feels uncertain. Next, we'll explore the enduring hope that God promises, the kind of hope that never runs dry, even when everything else feels uncertain. You know, I think one of the most comforting things about faith is that it connects us to something unshakable. When we live in a world where everything changes, our jobs, our health, our plans, it's a gift to know that God doesn't. He stays the same. His love is constant. His promises are firm. And that gives us something we desperately need: hope, not wishful thinking, not a hope everything works out somehow. No, this is the kind of hope that's anchored in God's character. The kind that says, even if today is hard, I know God is still with me. Even if I lose everything, I haven't lost what matters most. That's a truth we see over and over again in Scripture. Think of Job. He lost everything: his wealth, his children, his health. And in his grief, he didn't pretend to be okay. He cried out. He wrestled. He even questioned God. But through it all, there was a thread of trust woven into his words. The Lord gave and the Lord has taken away, Job said. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Now that's not easy faith. That's not Sunday morning faith. That's been through the fire faith. That's the kind of faith we build when we stop placing our hope in what we can control and start placing it in the one who holds everything together, even when it looks like it's falling apart. And that brings us to something really beautiful. When we live rich toward God, our joy doesn't come and go based on circumstances. It's rooted, it's steady, because it's not built on temporary things. It's built on a relationship with the one who loves us more than we could ever imagine. Jesus never said, "Follow me and you'll be rich." He said, "Follow me, and I will give you rest." He promised peace, not possessions, presence, not perfection. And when we start to truly believe that, we stop chasing things that don't satisfy, because the truth is, we were never meant to be filled by stuff. Our souls were designed to be filled by God. I remember a conversation I had with someone who had achieved everything he dreamed of: career success, a beautiful home, financial freedom, but still felt empty inside. He said, "I did everything I thought would make me happy, and yet here I am, still searching." And I just looked at him and said, "Maybe that's because you're searching in the wrong places." See, the world teaches us that security comes from having more. But Jesus flips that completely upside down. He teaches us that true security comes from surrender, from letting go of our grip on the temporary and grabbing hold of what's eternal. It doesn't mean we stop working hard. It doesn't mean we don't plan wisely. But it does mean we stop building our identity around what we own, and instead, we build our lives on who we belong to. Being rich toward God means you find joy in the quiet moments, peace in the midst of uncertainty, strength when you have nothing left to give, because you're not walking alone. You're walking with the one who promises to provide, to protect, and to be present in every moment. And that's where real contentment comes from, not from having everything, but from knowing you already have the most important thing: God's presence with you. Maybe today you're carrying some stress. Maybe you've been trying to hold everything together: your finances, your future, your family. Can I encourage you? You don't have to carry it all alone. God sees you. He knows what you're facing. And He cares not just about your soul, but about your everyday life. The bills, the worries, the questions. He's not a distant God who only shows up when things are perfect. He's the God who draws close when things feel messy. And He's not asking you to have all the answers. He's just asking you to trust Him, to lean in, to open your heart to something more lasting than anything this world can offer. Because when we let go of our need to control everything, we make room for God to move. We make room for His peace to fill us, for His wisdom to guide us, for His grace to lift us up, even when we feel like we've failed. And that's the invitation Jesus gives: not to store up for ourselves treasures that can vanish overnight, but to invest in something that can never be taken from us: a life lived with Him. We've all got choices to make every day. Choices about what we value, what we trust, what we pour our time and energy into. And when we choose to be rich toward God, we're choosing the only treasure that lasts. It's made of grace, mercy, and love that never ends. And really, that's what we long for deep down, isn't it? Something secure, something lasting, something that can't be taken away. Because this world, as beautiful and full of promise as it can be, is also unpredictable. Things change in an instant. A phone call, a bill, a piece of news, and suddenly everything feels fragile. But God never changes. And when our treasure is in Him, when we're rich toward God, then even when the storms hit, even when things fall apart around us, we have an anchor that holds. That's why Jesus tells the parable the way He does. The rich man isn't condemned because he was successful or because he made plans. He's called a fool because he thought his wealth made him untouchable. He believed he was in control of his future. But that very night, that same night, his life was required of him. All those barns, all that grain, all that careful storing and saving, it didn't save him, And here's the haunting question Jesus asks at the end, then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? It's sobering, isn't it? But it's also freeing, because it invites us to shift our focus from what we can't hold on to the one who's been holding on to us all along. So instead of building bigger barns, maybe God is calling us to build deeper roots, to cultivate a life that reflects His love, to invest not in more stuff, but in more faith, more kindness, more time spent loving well and serving others. That's where our true wealth lies. And let's be honest, some of the richest people we know, in God's eyes, are the ones the world might overlook. The elderly woman who prays faithfully for others every morning. The single dad doing his best to raise his kids in love and truth. The friend who always shows up, even when it costs them something. They may not have much in the way of possessions, but they are deeply rich in things that last, and that's good news for every single one of us. Because no matter your circumstances, whether you're just getting by or doing well, whether you're in a season of growth or one of waiting, God is not measuring your worth by your net worth. He's inviting you to live fully, faithfully, and freely in His love, and when you do, something beautiful happens. You begin to see the world differently. You begin to find joy in small things, quiet mornings, honest conversations, the smile of someone you help without fanfare. You begin to live with open hands because you know your security doesn't come from what you hold, it comes from who holds you. So maybe today is the perfect time to ask, where is my treasure? Not to feel guilt or shame, but to get honest. To let God gently search our hearts and realign our focus, because the good news is you can always come back to Him. Always. Maybe you've been chasing the wrong things for a while. Maybe you've been stuck in a cycle of comparison, or weighed down by fear. Or maybe you've been blessed with abundance, but you've started to wonder what it's really all for. Wherever you are, God is already there, ready to receive you, ready to guide you, ready to fill your life with something far more lasting than wealth, eternal purpose. Jesus said, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So let's choose today to place our treasure, our time, our trust, our hearts in His hands, because He is faithful, He is good, and He is the only one who can give us a life that truly satisfies. So as you go about your day today, maybe just take a moment to breathe, to pray, and to ask God, what would it look like for me to be rich toward you today? And then listen. He might lead you to forgive someone, to give generously, to slow down and just be present with Him. Whatever it is, trust that it matters. Because every act of love, every step of faith, every choice to trust Him over your own understanding, it's all building something beautiful, something eternal, and that's the kind of wealth that never fades. So thank you for spending this time reflecting and growing with me. I hope you feel encouraged. I hope you feel seen. And most of all, I hope you walk away knowing that you are deeply loved by a God who isn't after your stuff, He's after your heart. If this message spoke to you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to share in the comments how God is moving in your life, or how you've seen Him provide in unexpected ways. And if you haven't already, go ahead and like this video and subscribe for more encouraging, faith-filled content. Remember, real treasure isn't found in what we keep. It's found in what we give, in who we trust, and in the love we share with God by your side. Every day is filled with hope and grace. Stay faithful, stay encouraged, and I'll see you next time. God bless you.